What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, March 3rd, 2017. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. It's been a long, crazy week. We have got so much to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble. The lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3, and we do have a lot of material to get through, so I don't know that I'm going to be able to take all the phone calls from people who call on in, and I'm going to ask you to please keep them pertinent and short so that we can stay focused on the news of the day. Obviously, big firestorm continuing around Jeff Sessions. The people who are attacking him have interpreted his recusing himself from the Russia investigation as a capitulation, and now they're pushing for his outright resignation. And what is going on here should be very, very obvious. The Democrats are trying to dismantle the Trump administration from the bottom up. They're going to go after every single one of his appointees. And now there's even word out there that they've got something on Mike Pence. They're going to try and get him to step down. Trump has to go on the offense here. He's playing defense. He's trying to maintain the high moral ground in a city that doesn't even know where the high moral ground would be located. It's probably in another time zone. And Trump has to regain the initiative. Because if he doesn't have the initiative, he will not win this fight, and that's exactly what it is. So basically, they're after Sessions, and if they get him, then they're going to go after somebody else, and Trump has got to put a stop to this. Story coming out of Stephen J. Lemon Blogspot. The New York Times wants Trump delegitimized and ousted from his office. They're basically declaring war on the President of the United States of America. And here we are 4 months in after the election. Donald Trump won, Hillary Clinton lost, and it has been non-stop trying to undermine him, discredit him. Oh, the election couldn't possibly be rigged. Well, the election was rigged. The Russians did it, and Trump is in cahoots. And they're just screaming and whining and crying until they get what they want. And the behavior is very understandable. It's just like a 5 or 6 year old who has discovered that if they fall on the floor and scream and cry, eventually mommy will give them the cookie. And the only way you stop that from happening is you stop giving the kid the cookie. Throw a pail of water in his face. And now the New York Times is out there screaming about this Russia connection. And let's take a very good look at what actually went on down with this. Sessions met with the Russian ambassador twice. The first time was at a party where there were a lot of ambassadors there. And the second meeting with Russia's envoy was in Sessions' function as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. And that's what they're supposed to do. He's supposed to meet with these people to discuss these issues. There's nothing improper there. Now, they're trying to make a big deal about, oh, he lied, he withheld it. No, the actual question needs to be repeated, because during Sessions' confirmation hearing, Al Franken asked, quote, if there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign. That's the important phrase right there. It limits the context of the question. Did anybody from Trump's campaign talk with the Russians about the campaign? And Sessions said no. And they're trying to take that and say, oh, he's up to something nefarious. Now, Donald Trump has come on out with, frankly, a rather lukewarm endorsement of Sessions. And he's saying basically the response could have been a little more accurate. So could Al Franken's question, to be very honest. The whole narrative is the Democrats trying to save face for losing the election. Everyone thought that they were rigged to win. And they're overplaying their hand. They're destroying their own brand. And they're losing their grip on reality. And this is a witch hunt. And the fact of the matter is the corporate media and the Democrats are trying to distort what Jeff Sessions was asked and how he answered to make it look like he was trying to do something underhanded. Now, here's where the hypocrisy really starts to come on out, because Sessions is hardly the only person in Washington, D.C. to meet with the Russian ambassador. That is, after all, why the Russian ambassador is there. And the Russian ambassador met with numerous Democrats. And we know that all the election fraud that's been uncovered so far favored Hillary Clinton. So where are all the people asking if Russia and the Clinton campaign were aligned together? It's just not being done here. Now, Senator Chuck Schumer is out there openly saying that he will not work with President Trump on anything. He refuses to do anything with Donald Trump. Well, if you feel that way, the honorable thing would be for you to resign rather than pushing for the Attorney General to resign. Because the fact that you can't stand Donald Trump is irrelevant to your campaign against the Attorney General, other than it's part of a larger plan to dismantle the Trump administration from within, bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. We're going to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And by the way, Chucky Schumer met with Vladimir Putin in New York City. It's not like the days of the Cold War where nobody met Russians. It's amazing here. Now remember, Chucky Schumer is the guy who gave Attorney General Loretta Lynch a free pass on her very questionable meeting with Bill Clinton during that email probe. That's no big deal. There's no collusion going on there. It's not important. We can't deal with that. And right on cue, a Soros-financed MoveOn.org holds a D.C. protest demanding Sessions' resignation. They're trying to dismantle the Trump administration from within, bit by bit by bit. Trump has got to stop it right now. No more resignations, no more capitulation, or they're just going to keep nibbling away at him like piranha until there's nothing left but the skeleton. Now, CNN was doing a story about this, about Sessions recusing himself from the investigation, and they make the claim on the air that Loretta Lynch recused herself in the investigation of Hillary's email server. And even one of their people on the air corrected them a little bit after and said, no, she didn't actually recuse herself. She said she would leave the decision up to James Comey. But she never recused herself. So CNN is out there once again lying. Maxine Waters has definitely been looking down on that shark today. She's out there claiming that Sessions' Russian connections will result in Trump's impeachment. Again, one of the meetings between Sessions and the Russian ambassador was at a function where there were a lot of ambassadors. And it's hard to go to a party full of ambassadors and not bump into a couple of ambassadors. It really is ridiculous. And the second meeting was in the context of his official business as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. How do you get from there to we are going to impeach Donald Trump? And I am really getting sick and tired of these whiners. They are a disgrace to the nation. I'm embarrassed to see these people being held up to the world as the best representatives of our American society. We're going to take a phone call now. Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I look forward to hearing today's edition of Clarification.
Yes.
I hope Claire's doing well.
She's doing much better. Thank you.
Good. Mike, today's Democrats are making Joseph McCarthy look like a decent, honorable man.
Boy, that's a trick. That is a real trick.
But Mike, what's happening is also the Russian ambassador is now being implied that he is a spy, not just an ambassador, and he's recruiting spies.
Well, that's easy to say now because and it's all baseless. It's all baseless. I mean, it really is. You're absolutely right to draw the parallel with McCarthyism and the Big Red Scare and all that propaganda that was out there, because we may have been on the same side with Russia during World War II, but our money junkie class was absolutely terrified of socialism, because socialism says you can't have money junkies. And that's why our schools brainwashed us so hard to hate the Soviet Union, to hate the commies, and to just love our private central bankers.
But, Mike, the Democrats loved Russia when Stalin and Lenin were in power, and they had the gulags and communism. Now that communism is gone and the gulags are gone, they hate Russia.
No. The reason they hate Russia is because Putin took over control of Russia's private central bank and is running it for the benefit of the entire country and all of the people. Prior to that, Putin was everybody's friend. We were partners with Russia. Everybody was going along, and the new Russian republics had a private central bank playing the same games with Russia that the Federal Reserve plays with the American people. And Putin said, this has got to stop, and he took over direct control. Now, Russia's central bank is still owned by its private owners, but they don't get to make the decisions about how Russia's economy is going to be run. And literally that was the day Putin went from friend and partner to the top of the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list. It's all about the money. It's all about the private central bankers continuing to hold the entire world as slaves to their debt machine.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree on that point as well. But, you know, today Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson for the foreign ministry in Russia, criticized this CNN reporter, their correspondent, for their fake news, and this despicable correspondent replied to her, "Oh, that's the same thing Trump is saying. Are you coordinating with the White House?" It's just, you know, they've hit an all-time low.
You know, if we all look up and say that the sky is blue, it doesn't mean there's a conspiracy. We're just all looking up and seeing what's blatantly obvious to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean this, and I'll just leave you with this. I don't read People magazine, but I still have AOL, and I saw this People magazine came out with a story about George Bush and his painting. You know, it's the corporate media. They're trying to rehabilitate George W. Bush. There's a love fest with George W. Bush. I just wish George W. Bush never got into politics and just painted, because the world would have been a lot better place than it is today without him.
Well, I mean, the same thing could be said about Hitler. He wanted to be an artist, and if he'd been accepted as an artist, he wouldn't have gone into politics, and we could have avoided that inconvenience. And by the way, I've seen some of Bush's paintings. He's a lousy artist, but he's out there hawking his book and hoping that his name value will get people to buy it and put it on their coffee table to prove they're loyal little Republicans. Not a chance in this household, I'll tell you.
Absolutely. All right, thank you, Mike. Have a nice weekend.
All right, thanks an awful lot. George in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, how you doing, Mike?
Hanging in there.
Well, anyway, I got a tweet from Donald Trump. He just tweeted this. I just lost it. But it says basically he's calling for investigation of Schumer and Nancy Pelosi of their Russian ties.
Good. He needs to do that. He needs to start playing offense on this thing. He's got to take off the gloves, and he's got to lose this illusion that Washington, D.C. is somehow higher and more noble than the rest of our country. It isn't. It's the absolute pit, and it really is a swamp, and the alligators have all got rabies, and he can't go on just being defensive and trying to look like he's taking the moral high ground. There is no more moral high ground. There is winning and losing. And in order to win, Donald Trump has to take the initiative in this battle against his detractors. And right now, the American people are on his side, because the American people are looking at what the corporate media and the Democrats are doing. They're absolutely appalled by it. It is a point of shame for the American people to see our political system behaving this childishly.
Well, this is what the tweet says. I hereby demand a second investigation after Schumer of Pelosi for her close ties to Russia and lying about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of dirt there. And again, part of the hypocrisy is seeing all these Democrats trying to make mountains out of these tiny molehills, and they sat there with their lips clamped shut while the Clintons were just getting away literally with murder for decade after decade.
Well, here's another thing I want to warn the Obama in his bunker with Eric Holder and Valerie Jarrett, and that is on January 31st, 2012, signing the NDAA 2012. I think you just signed your own arrest warrant, because under the NDAA, I think the military can arrest him. I don't want to disappear him, but I just want him to be arrested.
Well, he's already in violation of that portion of Title 18 about advocating the overthrow of the government. You can go to jail for 20 years for that. And he's not the president anymore. He doesn't have any kind of administrative immunity. Barack Obama is a private citizen, and as a private citizen, if he's advocating the overthrow of President Trump, he's in violation of Title 18. Trump just needs to start enforcing the law and send the marshals over there, grab up all the paperwork that's talking about how they're going to get Trump out and say this is advocating the overthrow of the government, and it's a Title 18 violation. Trump has to go on the warpath, or he's going to lose this.
Well, because the thing is, Mike, these people ain't going to stop until you bloody their nose and throw them in the ditch.
Yeah, it's time to get out the sledgehammers on some of this nonsense.
Not only I want them defeated, I want their spirit and their motivation taken away too. Like we ain't going to be able to do anything.
Well, I'd like to see that happen, but you're dealing here with people who are fanatics. They're so blinded by their own greed and lust for power. In their own imaginations, they're the good guys and they're the heroes, and everything that they do is justified, and everything that they suffer, they're a martyr to their own cause. You're never going to convince them that they've been behaving badly. They've convinced themselves that they are the best of the best of the best of the best, and it's just going to be easier to lock them in a very, very dark cell and throw the key away.
Well, like I say, President Obama, I think when he signed NDAA 2012, signed his own arrest warrant. Thank you, Mike. Have a good weekend.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to take one more phone call from Steve in California. Then we're going to close the lines because I really do have a lot of stuff I need to get to. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you characterize the Democrats as being embarrassing, but I think it's worse than that. They're pathetic. And I heard Nancy Pelosi still trying to drum up the Russian connection with the Trump administration. But you know what? And I'm never offering any proof, of course. But where we can offer proof of a Russian connection would be with John McCain.
Yes.
And I haven't heard one person in corporate media talk about that wrongdoing of him reaching out to Russia to get campaign financing. Not once. Not once.
No, and you never will. It's a waste of time going to the corporate media and expecting them to all of a sudden start telling you what's really going on. That was never their job. Their job is to keep you bamboozled and snookered and blind and comfortable and obedient. That is what they're paid all that money to do. And you're absolutely right. The corporate media will not report on John McCain's soliciting of illegal campaign contributions from Russia, just like the corporate media turned a blind eye to when the Clintons were getting illegal campaign contributions from China back during the Chinagate scandal. That got scarcely a mention. And when the corporate media mentioned it, it was always to say, oh, there's really nothing there. It's nothing going on. It all goes back to that Bush, Clinton, CIA drug cartel and the influence they have over the corporate media. And they partnered up with the globalists like Soros, and they're in a panic because all of a sudden the people of planet Earth are opening their eyes and waking up and saying, whoa, this is not what we were told our society was in those state-controlled public schools.
Hey, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Steve. We're going to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines for a little bit. Rush Limbaugh is starting to get back onto my list here, and he was talking on his show about how this whole Russia Sessions story is about Obama and the Democrats trying to sabotage the Trump presidency, and yes, that's exactly right. And they're trying to keep this story out there at the forefront so that people aren't looking at the other stories going on, like how John McCain was caught soliciting illegal campaign donations from Russia all the way back in 2008. McCain's being funded by George Soros for all of these years. They don't want the American people to know that stuff. So this is not really about Sessions. This is about a plan to dismantle the Trump administration by picking off his lieutenants one after another, after another, after another. And if Trump caves in and lets Sessions go, they'll immediately go after somebody else. There are rumors they're getting ready to try and get Pence out. And Trump had better realize this is a fight for the survival of his administration. And more than that, all this time that he's spending defending himself is time that he's not able to do his job. This is a government that is paralyzed by its factionalism. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And trending on Twitter right now is Democrats who met with the Russian ambassador. So this is already backflashing onto the Democrats, and they're already putting up the lists and the names. Landrieu, Cantwell, Casey, Klobuchar, Reid, Whitehouse, McCaskill are some of the Democratic lawmakers who met with the Russian ambassador. And they did so, we presume, in the course of their normal business, and so did Senator Jeff Sessions. Now, over at Oraz.com, they've got an op-ed saying Jeff Sessions should absolutely not resign over these bogus Russia allegations. And I'm 127% in agreement with that. We're seeing a feeding frenzy of the Democrats. They smell blood in the water. They want to just dart on in and rip off a piece of the Trump administration, bit after bit. And Trump has got to stop it right absolutely now, or they're going to start ripping his administration apart bit by bit. That'll be the next 6 months, going constantly after members of his administration, keeping Trump on the defensive, keeping him having to deal with all of this so that he doesn't have any time left over to actually implement his agenda, or, more to the point, dismantle Obama's agenda. Because apparently Obama is taking it personally that Trump is undoing so much of what Obama's liberal agenda had been for the last 8 years. And Obama seems to forget it is the prerogative of the president to set their own policy coming on in. There is no obligation for Donald Trump to continue policies of past presidents, especially if those policies aren't working, like Obamacare. Meanwhile, they're trying to make a big deal over Kellyanne Conway, who was caught on video basically kneeling on one of the couches in the Oval Office. Now, my understanding is she got onto the couch and got down because she was trying to allow people who were behind to see past her. And they're trying to make a big deal about it. They're even calling it Kneelgate. Now, nobody complained about all the times Obama was putting his feet up on the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. That desk is an historical artifact. It's not just a desk. It was a gift from Great Britain. It's made from the timbers of one of their warships, the HMS Resolute. There's a lot of history in that desk. And Obama would just kick back, put his feet up on it. Nobody said a thing about it. And let's not forget about how when the Clintons were in the White House, they were out there literally renting out sleepovers in the Lincoln bedroom for $400,000 a pop. But Kellyanne Conway kneeling on the sofa in the Oval Office is a scandal according to the corporate media. No, it isn't. And actually, she looked rather fetching. Now, as you know, they're trying to gin up some hearings in Congress about this Russian link, and we already know it's going to be total USDA choice bovine excrement because they were already asking this former British spy, Christopher Steele, to come on in and testify as to what he knows. Now, his dossier that was handed to the FBI by John McCain has already been totally discredited. But they wanted him to come on in and say, oh, yes, Trump was doing this and Trump was doing that, and I have it on good. And it's all going to be hearsay, and the Democrats are going to say, well, we have Christopher Steele here. He's a spy. How could you even think that a spy could lie? Aside from the fact that being a big part of their job. Well, you want to talk about a witch hunt. It's amazing. Now, Trump is learning rapidly what's going on, and Trump went on to Fox News and said basically he thinks it's the Obama people, the holdovers, are behind the leaks within his administration, and how he believes President Obama was behind this organizing against Trump's administration. Now, we know that Obama's original plan, had Hillary won, was to move out here to Hawaii. They'd even bought a house here. More when we come back from these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So we're talking about Barack Obama apparently being a ringleader, if not the ringleader, of this attempt to bring down, to overthrow the Trump administration, in effect, to overthrow the current legitimate elected government of the United States of America. And there's ample reason to think that that's certainly the case. Now, Obama's original plan, after his term in office was over, they were going to come on out here to Hawaii. They bought a really nice house, or somebody bought them a house. Very lovely place over there on the windward side of the island. And then all of a sudden, when Hillary lost the election, the Obamas get a house in Washington, D.C., only about 2.5 miles away from the White House. And right now, they have Valerie Jarrett, his senior advisor from the White House years, is now living in the house with Barack and Michelle, and Eric Holder is hanging out there as well. And Eric Holder is already out there saying, get ready for Barack Obama to reappear on the public stage. He's ready to roll. And yes, it's subversion, it's sedition, and it's right out of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. And that's exactly what's going on in. Another story about this from Zero Hedge. Valerie Jarrett moves in with the Obamas in D.C. to lead the fight and strategy to topple Trump. Boy, there's never a drone around when you really, really need one here. Now, as I mentioned to that caller a little while ago, the caller was saying that the National Defense Authorization Act may have resulted in Barack Obama's arrest warrant for his current activities. And by the way, he could be arrested for that Department of Justice slush fund. That was illegal too. It's going to be more about that later on. But looking at Title 18, Section 2385, anybody advocating the overthrow of the government can go away for a very, very, very long time. And up to 20 years. And this kind of lawlessness seems to have become the hallmark of the liberal Democrats. Look at all the sections of Title 18 that Hillary Clinton was acknowledged to have violated by the head of the FBI, Director Comey, and then they turn around and say, well, we're not going to prosecute. We're above the law. You slaves out there, we will impose the law upon you, but we, the elites, we're above the law because we've got control of those rigged election machines, and we'll just do what we care to do here. Now, Donald Trump is out there basically saying that the corporate media is completely fraudulent, and he's right. And he's specifically targeting the large corporate media that have been openly hostile and deceptive to him, and basically saying they write lies. Absolutely, like that whopper about Saddam's nuclear weapons, or how Assad was gassing his own Alawite supporters with sarin gas right in front of the United Nations chemical weapons inspectors on the very day they arrived. And by the way, the United Nations chemical weapons inspectors said, no, that isn't what happened. It was the U.S.-backed rebels that were using chemical weapons to frame Assad. The corporate media never told you that, did they? Then there was that one about how, the Lusitania wasn't smuggling weapons to Britain when it was sunk, or torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, the Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, humans are warming the earth. Unemployment is only 5%. Vaccines are totally safe. A little radiation is good for you. GMOs are safe. Vince Foster committed suicide. And on and on and on. Yes, the corporate media lies to you. That is what they are paid to do. Nobody needs to pay somebody million-dollar salaries to report the truth. These people are paid that kind of money to be very convincing liars. Now then, apparently there's a new scandal out there where the president of CNN has actually been getting on the headset net with interviewers of anybody in the Trump administration and feeding in zinger questions. At one point, when they thought they were going to score some points, Zucker actually told the newsroom, forget the commercial breaks. We're going to screw our investors. Forget the commercial breaks. We're going to stay on this until we draw blood. And Zucker is now starting to look like that Elliot Carver character out of the James Bond movie Tomorrow Never Dies. He's a media mogul, and he makes the news, and he starts wars, and wow. Life imitates art. It's amazing. Well, not really, because the CNN brand is continuing to plummet. There's a new YouGov poll showing that CNN is below MSNBC and Fox News in brand perception. And basically, of the three cable news networks, Fox News was the only network to score a neutral brand perception. Neither good nor bad, just, yeah, they're okay. CNN and MSNBC both scored negative on brand perception. People are waking up to what's going on. They're turning away from it. It's a race between those who want to bring down Donald Trump and the ultimate credibility collapse of the corporate media and the Democratic establishment, and much of the Republican establishment with it. Over at the Washington Compost, they're trying to low-key the fact that the Washington Post's new owner, Jeff Bezos, founder and CEO of Amazon, currently has a $600 million contract with the Central Intelligence Agency. So whose agenda do you think Bezos is going to be recommending that the Washington Post report on? That $600 million contract, even for a billionaire like Bezos, it's a big deal. It's more than twice as much as Bezos paid to buy the Washington Post 4 months ago. If you're wondering why the Washington Post isn't what it was back in the days of Watergate, that's why. It changed ownership. It was bought up by people with agendas. Now, as I mentioned, the polls are showing public trust in corporate media is in decline. Their audience is in decline. They've lost so much audience and revenue, they're now resorting to fraud to keep their numbers up. Fake Twitter followers, fake clicks on their websites generated by Chinese botnets. The writing is more or less on the wall. Over at PatriotRising.com, they have an article about the media and relevance, and they're calling it a slow fade-out. And that is what's going on. As the more time passes, the more the corporate media is marginalizing itself. And all they can do is sit there and say, we're the real news, we're the real news, we're important, we're the real news. New York Times got a huge ad campaign going on right now about how they're the real news, and the rest of us out here, we're bad people. You shouldn't listen to us. They don't have big million-dollar studios. They're not driving expensive cars. They don't have gold things on the wall. You shouldn't pay attention to them. Only listen to us here. Now, we were talking about the disaster over at the Academy Awards, about how, and I'm not talking about the Best Picture screw-up, but it was nonstop bashing of Trump, and Trump got it correct when he said they were spending so much time attacking Trump, they forgot to actually put on an entertaining show. Now, we had reported earlier on how the initial ratings for the Academy Awards were the second worst in the entire history of the Academy Awards. The final numbers have come on in, and actually, this last Academy Awards, the Let's All Gang Up on Donald Trump Fest, got the all-time worst ratings for any Academy Award show in all of Academy history. And by the way, 10 million more people tuned in to watch Trump's speech before Congress than tuned in to watch the Academy Awards. So there's another institution that has destroyed its own brand by getting into politics. Now, according to a former U.S. attorney, Joseph DeGenova, the former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia under Reagan, the CIA knows who's been leaking classified information from inside the White House to the New York Times and the Washington Post. That information has been passed on to Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Maybe that's why they're trying to gang up on him and drive him out of office. To send a message, you don't stand up to the hidden Democratic machine. You don't start looking at things like CIA drug smuggling and whether or not Vince Foster really committed suicide. You don't do that. We will destroy you. The politics of personal destruction, which was a term that goes all the way back to the Bill Clinton administration here. Now, Trump's advisors are pushing him to just have a purge of the White House executive staff, both inside the White House itself and the executive office building, get rid of all the Obama appointees. I absolutely 100% agree. The time to take the high ground and be nice and magnanimous and generous is over. These people that you allowed to continue in these very high-paying jobs that you imagined were going to be loyal to the new administration are not. It's time to take off the gloves, clean out the White House, the executive office building, get in people that you know are going to be supportive of the Trump presidency, the Trump administration, who are going to keep their mouths shut and their thumb drives empty. And it's another area in which I've been very concerned about Donald Trump coming into D.C. politics and the White House as dangerously naive as Jimmy Carter. Carter was completely unprepared for just how dirty D.C. politics can be. And unless Trump takes the initiative in this fight, he will continue to lose. And now is the time for Trump to show leadership over deal-making. Donald Trump has been a businessman all his life. He needs to put that down and start being the president. His speech before Congress was a good start. We can see the direction he's going, but he's got to put pedal to the metal. His opponents are playing for keeps. Trump needs to play for keeps as well. There's no such thing as a good loser in this kind of game here. Now, article that came on out from Above Top Secret, I think really says what's going on. Okay, that's the monthly test of our emergency warning system. So there's this article that came on out in AboveTopSecret.com. I've lost all respect towards the Democratic Party. They don't want to bring America together. Absolutely right. I've lost all respect for anybody who's a Democrat, anybody who's a liberal. And they go down this list of what happened during that speech before Congress. Not standing when everybody else did, thumbing down the president, booing, playing with their iPhones and tablets, the women wearing all white. What do they think they are, Vestal virgins? I rather doubt it. And by the way, I wish to point out, the only Democrat in the Democratic woman in that room not wearing white was Tulsi Gabbard. She refused to go along with that nonsense. And then, of course, finally, as soon as the speech was over, they just got on out of there as fast as they could. They are behaving like spoiled children. And the more they do that, the more they're damaging their own brand. They could succeed in bringing down Donald Trump and find themselves facing an American people not willing to let them put a Democrat in. And that could be the crash of the United States of America that I have been dreading and warning about, like the former Soviet Union. And, boy, that's a tough choice. If you were forced to choose between having the government return under the control of the liberal Democrats and Hillary Clinton versus seeing the entire government collapse and having to go through the process of starting a new American republic here, which one would you choose? It's a tough choice, I will grant you. It's a very, very tough choice. Now then, we've been talking about this slush fund that was set up in the Department of Justice. And basically it was being run as kind of a scam where corporations that were under investigation by the Department of Justice were allowed to have the charges dropped as long as they would make donations to a third-party charity, meaning a non-governmental organization pushing for leftist causes. And that's illegal, and Obama could be arrested on that by the Department of Justice, and maybe that's another reason they're trying to get rid of Sessions. Because this Bush-Clinton duopoly that has ruled our nation for the last 20 years are liable for prosecution for a huge, long list of crimes. If we really had a just legal system, some of those people would be going away for the rest of their lives. And they should. Not for revenge, not for retribution, but as a warning to up-and-coming younger politicians that we, the American people, will not tolerate this kind of behavior any longer. Now, the GOP is planning to pass a law specifically outlawing this shadowy Department of Justice slush fund that was bankrolling these leftist groups. And they do have the votes to push it through, and Trump will sign it. Now, over in western Pennsylvania, there's a school board member who posted to social media, "Make America Great with a clean headshot." And this is Crawford Central School Board member Glenn Tuttle is standing by the posts, will not take them down, will not apologize. And I'm still wondering why all these people talking about assassinating the president are not being arrested, because it is a crime just to make that threat. Now, we're just getting an update on one of Sessions' meetings with the Russian ambassador. We said there was a meeting where there were a lot of ambassadors. It turns out Sessions was required to be at this group, the Global Partners in Diplomacy, by the United States State Department under then-President Obama. Obama said, you got to go over to this group, and you're going to speak to all these ambassadors, and after it was all over, the ambassadors came on up and thanked him for his remarks. That's it. That's the meeting they're trying to turn into this horrible, horrible crime. Now, Francois Fillon is definitely in serious trouble. His home has been raided by corruption investigators. His campaign is on the verge of collapse. His endorsers are pulling back their endorsements and saying, we're not going to be part of this. So it looks like he is pretty much down and out at this point. And, of course, that's good news for Marine Le Pen, who has actually garnered a huge amount of popular support over this nonsense of the ISIS photos being tweeted. We'll take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And, boy, I got to get that mixer replaced here. Anyway, getting on back to the news here. Over in the war zones, U.S.-backed forces have surrendered wide areas near Manbij to the Syrian army. So Syria is rapidly drawing to a close over there. Now, ramping up the tough talk, NATO has issued a demand that Russia drop their recognition of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. NATO's demanding Russia go on back and say, we recognize a united Georgia. And they're going to get a big niet on that one, at which point NATO will come back and say, well, Russia's being intractable. Russia is refusing to cooperate with us. You're making unrealistic demands there. All right, we're going to take 2 phone calls, then we're going to close the lines again because I got a lot of news before the Lady Claire comes on. So Jerry in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Anyway, what's on my mind today is drugs, okay? You know what the most dangerous thing is? Is a person who's drug addicted who cannot get their fix. They'll do anything to get that high. Now, if Donald Trump were to mandate drug tests for each and every politician, what do you give him to anyway say, you guys got it once. Everybody's going to take a pee test. You find any illegal narcotics, cocaine, heroin in your body, you're out. You have 1 month. If you refuse the test, you're out. Mandatory drug test. That's all you have to do. This whole thing could stop. You have to get all the corruption out of your government. That's all it takes. Simple little pee test.
Yeah, but you know when the drug criminals are in control of the government is the last party that is going to be subjected to mandatory drug tests. I'm in agreement with you. I think anybody that we're...
Donald Trump...
I'm sorry?
Donald Trump is probably clean. I believe Donald Trump does not do drugs. I believe he doesn't need it. And he get enough support. You guys could get enough support, enough petition signed that the government take drug tests mandatory. If you guys got enough support for that, bang, that'd be it. Game over. You guys have a brand new government. You topple every sick, twisted, drug-addicted idiot you have running your government. It'd be over.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. But it's not going to happen under our current drug-corrupted government. Any more than, you could...
Make it happen.
I'm sorry?
Make it happen. You guys should just make it happen. Even pluck a hair off of each and everyone's head. Pluck a hair. Take it to the drug test.
Yeah, and then the bodyguards throw you up against the wall and put you in jail. It's good in theory. The practicality of it, though, needs a little bit of work. Okay, but you know, I would love to see it. I would love to see it, and maybe we'll put this in the blueprint for the new America. That anybody who is running for elected office or appointed office, along with putting all their wealth in a blind trust, they have to undergo a battery of drug tests. So we know that we're not getting somebody in there whose brain is melted on prescription antidepressants. Okay, Jerry, got to let you go. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And this is hour number 2, and the phone lines are closed. We're going to keep them closed because Claire and I both just have so much we need to get to. Over this last couple of weeks, there have been a number of events decried as anti-Semitic, and it's been a huge furor. There have been desecrations of some graveyards, and there was a flood of these telephoned bomb threats against Jewish institutions in the ADL. And I expressed a concern that in the past, every time Israel's getting ready to really do something nasty, they will do some of these. Hate crime hoaxes. Well, in this case, one of the hate crime hoaxes is a hoax, but it appears to have a personal motive. And it has to do with apparently a jilted ex-boyfriend made at least 8 of the phone call threats against Jewish community centers nationwide, plus a bomb threat at the Anti-Defamation League, in an effort to harass and vilify his former girlfriend. And the guy they've arrested in St. Louis, Juan Thompson, apparently is a former Intercept reporter and an anti-Trump Bernie Sanders supporter. So this hoax is definitely domestic in origin. This does not explain who was doing the cemeteries and the other incidences with swastikas and stuff. But it is a reminder that when you hear any of these horrific anti-Semitic this or that or racist this or that, very often it does turn out to be a hoax. And we should be very skeptical before we leap to any conclusions. Now, again, getting back to the fact that some of these Jewish cemeteries are being vandalized and everybody's out there saying, oh, it's a horrible thing, no respect for the dead, don't seem to remember how not too long ago a Muslim cemetery in Israel, Mamilla Cemetery, which is very, very old, very important to the Muslims, Israel just bulldozed it and paved it over in Jerusalem. And nobody seemed to kick up a fuss about that. Now, if you're the sort of person who is upset by the desecration of a cemetery, shouldn't it apply to all cemeteries? You know, why is it a big deal when a Jewish tombstone gets knocked over and the corporate media goes epileptic, but Israel can bulldoze and pave over an entire historically important Muslim cemetery in Jerusalem? Man, it's no big deal. Now then, Israel has once again refused entry to Human Rights Watch, and basically their reasoning is that Human Rights Watch is not sufficiently pro-Israel to be allowed in to examine what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank. Israel only wants to have outside investigators come on in who hate the Palestinians as much as Israel does, then they'll be allowed to come on in. Let's talk about the economic news here, because something that the corporate media really is not paying a lot of attention to are the indicators that things are really very fragile. And that's actually, despite all the alligators in the swamp who are nipping at Donald Trump's derriere, the real challenge he faces is coming up here in the second quarter with the economy. And even Bank of America is out there saying their analysts are showing there's going to be some kind of a correction, in the second quarter. Now, interestingly enough, silver took a 4% fall on a massive $2 billion of futures selling. And there were no market news, no corresponding sharp moves in other markets. Somebody was selling short, and it drove the current price down. It looks like more manipulation. They are still trying to figure out a way to have you keep your money in those negative interest rate savings accounts and in your stock portfolios. And they're just a constant attack on silver and gold. When those controls finally come on off, we're going to see those metals literally explode upward. Janet Yellen is saying this month, March, is ripe for a federal rate hike. Now, if the Fed hikes the rate, it's going to make any borrowing that Trump needs to do for his infrastructure more expensive for you, the American taxpayer. And for those of you trapped into variable rate mortgages and auto loans, it means your payments are about to go up. But the Federal Reserve, I guess they're feeling they're not making enough money off of you people, so they're going to hike the rate a little bit. Now, again, getting on back to the infrastructure project, Donald Trump has two options legally open to him. The first is, on his authority as president, he can issue a parallel currency, the way Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy did. Currency that does not earn interest payable to the privately owned central bank, the Federal Reserve. They call themselves the Federal Reserve to fool you into thinking they're part of the government, but they are not. It's a privately owned central bank answerable to no federal government authority. According to Alan Greenspan, it's no more federal than Federal Express. It's just a name. They were going to call it the Third Bank of the United States, but they were concerned that historians would look back at the first and second banks of the United States and recognize the scam about to happen again. So they called themselves the Federal Reserve. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates. Just now we're joining the network. Obviously, we're talking about the economy. There's a very revealing story over in fourthmedia.org. Can truth prevail or the fake news? And we already know that the unemployment number is an absolute joke played by the government on you, the American people. They're still claiming that there's a 5 to 6% jobless rate, even though there are over 90 million legal American citizens willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs for months, if not years. Well, it turns out we know that they've been rigging the inflation numbers, and as a result, according to this story, the U.S. gross domestic product numbers are completely untrustworthy. According to the official U.S. government wishful thinking, the U.S. gross domestic product has expanded for 22 quarters straight, raising the real gross domestic product 12.1% over its high prior to the 2008-2009 economic meltdown from the mortgage-backed security fraud. Yet, at that same time period, U.S. manufacturing output and industrial production have not recovered from those pre-2008 highs. So what's going on here? And this article is saying the rise in the GDP is a manufactured illusion produced by the undermeasurement of inflation. Now, the way the government is playing this little scam is they're making inflation invisible. They calculate inflation on the basis of a selection of products and services most Americans are going to be using and how their prices are going up. Now, in the past, under the honest system, if the price of an item in the inflation measure rose, the inflation rate would rise with it by the price times the weight of the item in the index. Now, we already know they're leaving food and gas off the index, which are where inflationary pressures surface first. But what they're pointing out in this article is today, if a price of an item in the inflation measure rises, that item is removed and a lower cost item substituted in its place. They're cherry picking the data to get the numbers they want. There is nothing coming out of the U.S. government that you should trust. And the corporate media is lying about everything except the weather and the sports scores, and they're not even all that good on the weather. Barnes & Noble sales have fallen on fading demand for once popular products, meaning news magazines and newspapers. People just aren't getting them anymore. They're coming to the independent media online to find out what's going on, or they're going to the foreign media. It's amazing how much more accurate the European press is about what's going on in the United States than the United States corporate media. Vanity has declared bankruptcy and will close all of their stores. Now, somebody did a study about online shopping, and this was an issue for us because with the closure of all the small boutique computer stores and everything, we still have a Best Buy. I hate going in there, and they don't really have what I need anyway. So I have to order a lot of what I use here online and wait for it to ship here. I've ordered a replacement for this headset. It's completely falling apart. I got bits of foam in my ear and everything. Still waiting for it to arrive. I have ordered some things that will take as long as 2 months to get here. And so there is this article over in island.net showing that a state-by-state analysis of online shopping by the website extrabucks.com ranked Hawaii dead last, the worst state to live in for online shopping. And it is a major headache, especially when trying to order something nice for Claire's upcoming birthday. So, basic necessities, basic functions are starting to erode. It's almost like Hawaii and even Alaska as well. Alaska's way down there. It's like we're already being cut adrift from the mainland commerce. We just don't count anymore. Now, to nobody's surprise, this is over from governmentslaves.info. There was a study that discovered that in states where employers must screen illegals for job interviews, there are fewer jobless Americans. I don't think we really needed a study for that. We all pretty much understood that's the way it's working. In states where employers can hire the illegals, legal Americans are going without jobs. In states where employers must validate the legal residency or citizenship of potential employees, there are fewer jobless Americans. I don't know why that should be a shock, but it is. Okay, apparently an illegal El Salvador migrant gang members, actually a bunch of them, illegal El Salvador migrant gang members who had a satanic shrine in their apartment, kidnapped, drugged, and raped a 14-year-old Houston girl and murdered another. And apparently they're members of the MS-13 gang. When they were arrested and went to court, they're smiling and laughing and waving. They think it's just wonderful. More MS-13 gang members have been arrested in connection with the Brentwood teen murders that happened in September of last year. And they've arrested a total of 13 members of MS-13 on a broader 41-count indictment that includes attempted murders, assaults, racketeering, obstruction of justice, arson, conspiracy to distribute marijuana, related firearms, and conspiracy charges. 10 of those defendants are illegal aliens. Now, over in Austria, 8 Iraqi men have been arrested and jailed for the gang rape of a German tourist woman. 28-year-old German woman just over in Austria visiting. It's a very, very lovely place. I've been there myself. And apparently they gang raped this woman during New Year's celebrations, New Year's of last year. We were hearing about all these Cologne, Germany and everything, but apparently it was happening in Austria, and they've thrown these guys in jail. Now, getting on back to Iraq, Iraq's own intelligence services are sending a warning that ISIS jihadists are among the refugees coming to the United States of America. Now, Iraq is trying to arrest them as they're detected, but it's pretty much a certainty they're not getting them all. Over in Sweden, which is supposed to be this amazingly safe place, and everybody who thinks Sweden is dealing with a crime and rape epidemic is just a tinfoil hat-wearing kook, Swedish women are living in fear not just from the immigrants, but apparently the extreme feminist militants, for some reason, are going on the warpath against anybody who's not supporting the liberal agenda. It's Europe is driving itself crazy. The whole human race seems to be driving itself crazy. And we've talked before about how these journalists from Chicago were sent to report on a Swedish no-go zone after Trump's allegations that the country is dangerous because of the open borders. And these journalists were given a police escort and warned they should leave for their own safety. And apparently some masked thugs objected to being filmed in broad daylight and presented a threat, and they had to be taken out of there. Now, as they crank up the deportation machine here in the United States, there's yet another manufactured controversy because apparently a secretive Palo Alto security firm, Palantir, you'll probably remember the name from Lord of the Rings, co-founded by Peter Thiel, has built the engine for Donald Trump's deportation machine. In other words, they're trying to overcome this pattern that was during the Obama administration where they were allowing the illegals across the border, the refugees to come on in, and then they were using taxpayer funds to spread them all across the country into all these little towns that didn't want them all across America to make it very difficult to round them up. And apparently this security firm has developed a system that will allow for the rapid identification of these illegals, leading to their deportation. Now, European Parliament has decided that they're going to express their ire over America's new sovereignty and refusal to go along with globalism, and they're ending visa-free travel for Americans. So apparently from now on, if you want to go to any place in Europe, you will have to apply for a travel visa. And you know who's going to pay for that? European tourism. A lot of people are going to say, if I can walk onto a plane and go to Europe for a vacation, I'm going to do that. If I have to go through this whole visa nonsense, I'm going to go to Disneyland instead. So the European Parliament has just delivered a hammer blow to Europe's tourism industry, just to express their ire, their disapproval of the direction America is taking. Now, Marine Le Pen is facing one other rival for the French presidency. That's Emmanuel Macron. He's a full-blown globalist, and he's out there making all these speeches about don't worry about mass migration. Newcomers will renew our society. He said immigrants are good for France and bring fresh bursts of creativity and innovation into France. Really? Have you seen the photos and videos from those riots in Paris? I can tell you right now, the French people have. And by the way, the French people have a strong sense of self and dignity, and they don't like to be treated like they're morons, and that is also working in favor of Marine Le Pen. Now, over in France, their corporate media is declaring Macron is going to win, Le Pen couldn't possibly do it, nobody likes her, and you know, she's anti-immigration, so nobody's going to vote for her, and the French people don't care about immigration. And they're having about as much success as America's corporate media had in selling Hillary Clinton last year. So right now, I would say that Marine Le Pen is a strong probable that she will win the presidency of France, and of course that will pour more salt into Hillary Clinton's wounds. Good. Meanwhile, latest polls are showing more than half of Dutch voters want to leave the European Union. And apparently over in Serbia, one of their politicians, Mogherini, was getting up to make a speech, and all of a sudden the entire parliament started chanting, "We don't need the EU, we don't need the EU." They're holding up signs saying, "We don't trust Brussels." So you got a very, very cool reception to this idea about, oh, we've got to get closer to the European Union. The EU is failing. It is falling apart. And all of George Soros' horses and all of George Soros' men are not going to be able to put the EU back together again. Italy's got the right idea. Bring back your own domestic currency in parallel with the euro so that when the euro fails, it's not an economic shock where nobody has currency to conduct business with. Every nation in Europe ought to be doing that right now. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, interesting little development We're looking at this story where Mexico says it will defend the rights of its migrants and cooperate with the United Nations. This is a little bit out there. There's a senior Mexican official told the United Nations Human Rights Forum just last night that Mexico's government will defend the rights of Mexican migrants from discriminatory security measures. Now, he didn't specifically name the United States, but that was strongly implied. So Miguel Ruiz Cabanas, the Undersecretary for Human Rights, is out there basically taking the attitude that people in Mexico have a natural right to cross over the border, and Donald Trump is wrong for trying to stop them from doing that. And he went on out to where he was denouncing what he called populist ultranationalism. How dare these people want to have their own country? And reiterated the government of Mexico's commitment to the defense of our nationals abroad. Okay. Nowhere in the Constitution of the United States of America does it say that foreign citizens of foreign countries have any kind of an automatic right to come to the United States. There is no right. There is a privilege, as long as you follow the legal immigration proceedings. The globalists want that to go away, and that's why they hate the Brexit, that's why they hate Donald Trump, that's why they're trying to bring down Marine Le Pen. Their dream of a global, one world government, one world private central bank, one formless mass of humanity that is easy to control, steer, and exploit is slipping from their fingers. Now, Chuck Schumer, who was out there screaming about Trump and Sessions and all the rest of that, is dealing with his own immigration embarrassment because apparently he pulls strings for the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi to allow a gentleman named Tanvir Hussain into the United States of America. And Schumer basically went to the embassy and said, let this guy in. Well, let this guy in. And apparently the guy has now been arrested for child sex abuse. So apparently Chuck Schumer feels that a few raped children is a small price to pay to maintain that globalist dream of wide open borders here. Now, the European Union is beginning to realize things are not going well. Story that came out of shtfplan.com, European leader has a meltdown debating the future of the Union. You know, what do you want us to do? And they're struggling with the bureaucracy. It's sprawling. It's unaccountable. And looking at the faces of the EU's leaders, you can see they know they're in serious trouble. Now, there may be a reason for that. And it actually comes out of the world of business, which means Donald Trump is going to know this. There are two kinds of management of a company, matrix management and top-down management. Matrix management is great for small companies where there's maybe 8 or 10 people and they just talk to each other about how they're going to get things done. It's perfect for software development, any kind of entrepreneurial activity. But when a corporation starts to grow, it reaches a point where they have to abandon matrix-style management and go to top-down, or they start drowning in the sheer volume of their internal communications because the number of nodes on that matrix is growing. And the same thing happens to government. Now, small government, like the one the United States started with, can have a matrix approach. That's what Congress is. Congress is that matrix management system. But as nations grow and government grows with them, they reach that point where the massive internal communications back and forth between all the agencies and bureaucracies starts to overwhelm the system. The problem is politics is always inherently a matrix. They cannot change the matrix style, which is why all modern large empires are in trouble drowning in the mass of their own bureaucracy. And that is another reason why the EU and indeed any of these global unions and the New World Order ultimately cannot be made to function efficiently. Of course, the people who want them don't care about efficiency, they just want power and wealth. And they'll let you deal with the red tape. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Back after these few words. Hello, Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about the European Union. And I think to any objective observer, it is clear that except for the Brussels politicians and the European Central Bank, the European Union experiment is a complete and total failure. And they're in a panic because all these countries are talking about leaving. All of these candidates who are Eurosceptics who want out are leading in the polls and starting to win elections. They've got the Brexit vote they're dealing with. And the EU Commission chief, Juncker, over the last couple of weeks has been out there screaming that he's going to push for a federalized superstate, a single nation of Europe. Forget about all those other France and Italy. There'll be states like Delaware. Unimportant. This has triggered a tremendous pushback from not only the governments of those member nations of the European Union, who like to feel they're still in control of their territory, but from the people of Europe as well, who do not like to see large empires emerge, because inevitably bad things follow. And Juncker is now acknowledging that his superstate dream is over. Looking at the voting backlash in all these elections, we're coming up on some in the middle of this month that are going to send a very, very clear message. So it's starting to really fall apart, and the people of Europe need to be ready for it. Need to have an immediate alternate currency ready to move to when the euro collapses. I understand that Germany actually a few years ago started printing up a new Deutschmark and warehousing them to be able to put into circulation. Berlusconi is saying Italy needs to bring back the lira and put it into circulation now as a parallel currency. The European Central Bank isn't going to like that any more than the Federal Reserve liked Kennedy's United States notes. It cuts into their profits. Now, over in Great Britain, for some reason it's been decided to give the police even more powerful tasers than they already have, despite growing awareness that they are not, in fact, non-lethal weapons. And some years ago, when this debate first fired up, we actually had a cardiac expert call into the show saying that the problem is if that 30,000-volt jolt hits your heart at the right point in its beat cycle, it'll put it into fibrillation, and you will die. And we have heard of all kinds of people who are being tased by the police, and they die, and inevitably the police say, oh, there must have been some unknown medical problem. The tasers can't kill them. The company says they're non-lethal. We believe the advertising that these are non-lethal, and you should believe it too. Because we don't have to have any controls on the taser because they're non-lethal. It's not like the gun. You pull the gun, there's all kinds of paperwork. Actually, these days, there is a lot more paperwork involved with the use of a police taser. The trigger pulls are recorded, and there are records because there have been problems with those things. But apparently, the UK police are going to be given a more powerful taser to deal with whatever it is they're going to be dealing with over there. Now then, a police chief in Great Britain has gone public confirming that former Prime Minister Sir Edward Heath did abuse sexually children. This police chief is saying he raped as many as 30 children, and the British government covered it up. We are beginning to get this sense that the psychopathy of those who seek these kinds of powerful positions is seriously disturbed. We had our Franklin scandal here in the United States of America. Apparently there have been something like 1,500 people arrested for child sexual abuse in this country just in the last couple of months. Not a word in the corporate media about that. Again, Chuck Schumer pulled strings to allow a child sexual abuser into the country. Let him get a visa. And there does seem to be an ongoing problem with child sexual abuse within the church. within government, with any power structure. And I don't understand it. I don't want to understand it. Maybe it's these people are just so used to getting whatever it is they want. There's no excitement in their life, and the only way they can get the adrenaline going is to do something so horrific and terrible and shocking and get away with it. But we do know that the problem is there, and I think that was illustrated back when the Franklin scandal broke. There was a documentary that was made about it that was going to air on American TV. And members of Congress went to the channel and said, if you air that, we will pass laws that will make it impossible for your business to continue. And this program about the Franklin scandal was pulled. All the available VHS tapes were bought up and disappeared. But there was an editing tape, an editing work tape that survived, which is still available on YouTube where you can look on that. And it's very sick, pathological behavior. And I don't get it, and I even less get this idea that we should somehow accept this as normal behavior. It's a mystery. I mean, my opinion is that children should be allowed to remain children for as long as possible. They should keep their innocence as long as possible, because growing old, growing up, growing into adulthood, losing your innocence is a one-way trip. You don't get to go back. And when some sicko adult sexually abuses a child, they're not just sexually abusing the child, they're robbing them of that innocence and that youth and that childhood. And that to me is a grievous sin. Now then, down at the Austin airport, apparently a baggage handler and 2 others have been arrested. They were going through the checked luggage and stealing travelers' guns to trade for marijuana. And that's what you get for using those TSA-approved locks on your luggage. Open season on whatever you've got in there. And it's amazing between what you're not allowed to bring in your carry-on luggage, the fact that some airlines are now starting to ban carry-on luggage entirely. You're supposed to put everything in your checked luggage, your jewelry, your laptop, your cameras, and then you put on those TSA-approved locks, which can be opened by anybody who's stolen a copy of that master TSA key or made a copy of the TSA master key. It's not that difficult. Here in Hawaii, we have a problem with criminals who deliberately target Asian tourists, because in the Asian culture, being a victim of a crime is something shameful. They don't even want to admit it. And a lot of times, the Asian victims of crime here in Hawaii won't even report it to the police. They'll just accept the loss, pretend it never happened, and go back on home. So what the criminals will do is they'll get a job at a car rental agency, get their hands on the master key that opens up all the rental cars from that agency, make a copy of it, then they'll quit their job. And they drive around Hawaii, they spot the rental cars, they see if it's an Asian tourist family that's using it, and they'll empty out the trunk. Claire and I actually went through the experience many years ago of finding a family from Japan who spoke almost no English. They had a brand new baby, and they'd had everything taken, including their passports. And they were acting like they were the ones who'd done something wrong. And we finally got them hooked back with the concierge at their hotel to somebody who could speak Japanese to them. We got them to the police and basically got them sort of aimed back at getting home, but it was rather rough to see here. To the criminals, they don't care. That's why they like being criminals. They like going into government. Now, political correctness has really hit a ridiculous degree. Over at Scripps College, this is a prestigious women's school outside Los Angeles, they're trying to sell the idea that all non-white students must be given monetary compensation for the emotional labor of having to deal with microaggressions. In other words, we're going to take money away from all the white people and give it to the non-white people because we assume the white people are committing microaggressions against the non-whites, therefore they should be paid. With the definition of a microaggression being ridiculously vague and applied to almost every aspect of normal human behavior. But that's the idea Scripps College is trying to instill into their students' minds. I can just see these kids trying to find jobs after graduation. But I will agree to this idea as long as us more or less white people are paid an equal amount of money for our emotional labor to deal with idiots with useless college degrees. Now, the good news is political correctness has reached a point of becoming a caricature of itself. And it's making itself more and more ridiculous as time goes on. That's a good thing, because people are beginning to realize just how out of control this is. Now, let's talk about fluoride. You know that fluoride applied topically to your teeth, in theory, reduces tooth decay, especially among children. And that was the justification for a program of mandated water fluoridation in the United States of America, and a lot of people opposed it because fluoride is a toxic material. And, of course, back then, they dealt with the opposition the same way they do now. Anybody who opposed water fluoridation was a kook and a crazy and, you know, became fodder. They used that theme in the In Like Flint movies. Even Dr. Strangelove, he's obsessed about the purity of his water and portrayed as a nutcase for doing so. Just like today, if you want safe, healthy, organic food, you're mentally ill. You're suffering from orthorexia nervosa. But it turns out over in Ireland, where they have a very stringent water fluoridation program, they're currently in the middle of an epidemic of childhood tooth decay, where young kids are literally having to have teeth just pulled. And we're not talking about baby teeth. We're talking about the permanent teeth coming in and immediately rotting away. And it's already been demonstrated in this country that while topical application of fluoride might have a benefit, simply drinking in your water has absolutely no impact. Now, I'm very lucky to live in a state that banned water fluoridation all the way back in the 1990s. But again, we have all of these horrible mistakes that are imposed on us by some politician wanting to claim he's doing something good and get paid and applauded for it. And it turns out to not really be good at all. Now, here's something that's very alarming to me. This is over in yournewswire.com, and it's talking about a school over in Rochester, actually the Rochester School District, that was trying to get students to provide the paperwork to show that they had all the mandatory vaccines that state law requires to attend the school. And apparently 71 students came on in and said, we and our parents have concerns about vaccine safety. Now, you would think in a normal educational environment, the school administrator or the school nurse or somebody would sit down and say, what are your concerns? Let us work to assuage them. They didn't do that. They simply suspended the students. If you're not willing to accept the vaccines on faith, you are kicked out of school. And that, to me, says that they don't really have any answers for the growing concerns about vaccine safety. It's just making a lot of money, and that's all that really matters. It's making money. It's good if it makes money. It's bad if it loses money. We got the final numbers for the snow down on our big island. Up by the observatories on Mauna Kea, they picked up 8 inches of snow in Hawaii. Remember back in 2000, they were out there saying, snowfalls are now a thing of the past. And I got a letter from somebody saying, well, maybe they only meant in Great Britain. I said, yeah, remember what happened in 2009? The UK Met Office said, we're going to have a snow-free winter, and it was one of the hardest, most icy and snow-filled winters in history. Now, Donald Trump has ordered the Environmental Protection Agency to start zeroing out all the programs that are preaching human-caused global warming, and I can imagine Al Gore is rolling around on the floor and kicking and screaming and throwing a tantrum right now. But this is about $2 billion that EPA has been spending annually on this nonsense. And it was nonsense. It was a scam. Now, let's get into the world of computers. As you know, earlier in the week we had this Amazon Web Service blackout, and apparently yesterday there was a more regional computer failure that shut down multiple banks. And some of the banks just had to close early. They couldn't get anything happening there. Now, maybe it's the ongoing hacking, or maybe it is simply because our IT infrastructure is as neglected as the rest of anything else in this country. Or maybe it's because instead of dealing decisively with computer crime, we have loaded up all of these systems with so much security software that nobody knows how to manage it correctly anymore. Amazon is claiming that their outage earlier in the week was the result of a single typo by somebody who was trying to upgrade a system while it was running. Always a bad idea. But that's what they were trying to do. They mistyped a command and brought the whole system crashing down. Now, a little bit of good news for those of you who have been concerned about smartphone batteries. The gentleman who invented the lithium-ion battery, 94-year-old John Goodenow, has been working with a team of engineers at the School of Engineering at the University of Texas in Austin. And they've developed a new version that will be safer, faster charging, longer lasting, and they don't burn up. They're non-combustible. There's no material in them that can support combustion. Can they still burn out? Yes. In the process of burning out, are they going to set fire to your appliance and yourself? Probably not. It is a tremendous improvement. And this is going to be good news for the people at Boeing who are dealing with the very questionable lithium batteries in their 777s. Or was it the 787? It was one of their latest airliners that relied heavily on the lithium batteries, and they'd had a problem with fires there. We are going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're coming up on the top of the hour, and the lovely Lady Claire here. I'm looking at this very bizarre press release from John McCain's own website, where John McCain, Booker, King, and Meeks are reintroducing a resolution calling for the posthumous pardon for boxing legend Jack Johnson. Ooh, there's an important topical piece of business for McCain to be involving himself with. And especially when you consider situations like Leonard Peltier and Mumia Al-Jabbar, who are rotting in jail for crimes they probably did not commit. Earlier we were talking about how documents have surfaced confirming that the FBI was railroading innocent people into prison back in the 1960s. So it really is a circus. At this point, I am absolutely convinced the people of Arizona have not been voting McCain back into the Senate election after election after election after election. And once again, I think the most important thing that we need to do, the most important task for the Trump administration and the American people, is to get rid of this current flawed, fraudulent election system and get an honest election system back in sometime in the next 2 years. And I'm sure Trump is going to be wholly on board with this because he had to overcome massive election fraud to win the White House, and he has to know that in 2020 they'll just double up on him unless he can clean that mess out. Now, I get all these phone calls from people who are in here saying we should get rid of this, and the only way we can is to get an honest election system again. And so we have to put in a lot of thought about that, and I'm putting a lot of thought about that. We have to find a way to basically get the American people on board with this, to where they're going to stand up and say, we refuse to use the electronic machines. We refuse to use an election system that is not open and transparent. We demand an honest election system in this country. And boy, if you look at how this situation flip-flopped. Last October, President Obama was out there assuring us the U.S. election system is impossible to rig. And then as soon as Hillary lost, they said, oh, it was being rigged. Jill Stein was out there, oh, the election was rigged, and had those recounts, all of which failed, and all of which, along the way, exposed more election fraud favoring Hillary Clinton. As we reported yesterday, Ohio's just completed their investigation. Yes, illegal immigrants were registered to vote. Illegal immigrants were voting. And then Hillary came on out and said, Russia was rigging the election against me. Really? How come all the fraud we've actually found favored you? And then when Trump came on out and said that he was actually going to look into the issue of whether last year's election was fraudulent or not, boy, did you see everybody just explode. Don't you dare investigate the election. It's racist. It's this. It's that. Boy, they're panicking there. No wonder they hate him so much. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. When we come on back, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And for those of you watching on BAM Music TV, this gorgeous creature seated beside me is the lovely Lady Claire, and adding her unique perspective to the show. What's first on your list?
First on my list is apparently there's been a Soros-backed group in Ukraine organizing a massive blockade. And he's apparently put together a master plan to take over natural resources and minerals. Now, at the very beginning of the U.S.-sponsored coup d'etat that ousted legally elected President Viktor Yanukovych and sent him under the proverbial bus, the Maidan movement, comprised of Ukrainian ultranationalists, began protests and riots that led to fighting. Maidan was and is both encouraged and supported financially by none other than, drumroll please, George Soros.
Imagine my lack of shock.
The intent for Ukraine with Soros is no different: to crush the opposition of separatists and enable the U.S.-installed government to rail Ukraine into NATO and the IMF. Once this has been accomplished, Soros has a master plan of taking over a large portion of the eastern provinces because they have tremendous amounts of minerals and natural resources, and wants to pull his usual Sorosian trick of buying them for pennies on the dollar and bleed the country dry while taking the profits out of the country. And apparently what's happened has been a blockade of a massive amount of coal and several thousand tons. And unfortunately, if that coal cannot get to where it needs to be, the Ukrainian economy...
I got your pot down. I got your pot down.
May collapse.
Do you need to take a break?
No, I'm okay.
All right.
And so this could wind up in a shooting war at any second.
Okay. This may not have been a good idea. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry for the interruption. Okay. Well, that may have been enough here. All right. Okay. Claire's still recovering from what she had last week. And are you okay to put the volume up again?
Yes, I'm okay.
All right. Here we go.
Apparently, after border flare-up in Gaza, Hamas mouthpiece warns Israel crossing red lines, war may follow. Now, the Israeli soldiers shot up Gaza again. No one was hurt in the incident, the army said, but a patrol car was hit. And apparently this spokesperson for Hamas made the statement, if Israel wants a long period of calm, it must understand that the equation has changed.
Okay, I'm going to pull your pot down here again, and if you'll give me the notebook, all right. And, okay, your phone is ringing anyway, so we're going to, all right, well, that's okay. It was a noble, valiant effort, and, obviously you were not as over this thing as we both had hoped. All right, so let's see what Claire was going to talk about here. She's talking about incident with the border in Gaza. Nobody was hurt in the incident. Patrol car was hit. Actually, we're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines now, and so you guys can call on in, and we can just chit-chat for the next hour so that we can do that. Let's see what else she had here. Israel jets, tanks strike Hamas. in response to the cross-border firing. As usual, a rocket flies out of Gaza, hits absolutely nothing in Israel, and Israel uncorks. Okay. Apparently, Israel is looking at the thrashing around of the Trump administration and the attacks by the Democrats against him, and they're recognizing it as an opportunity to go ahead and commit aggressions against their neighbors in the sure and certain confidence that the American corporate media will decide it's not worth reporting on when they've got all of this Sturm und Drang about Donald Trump and his connections to Russia. By the way, Russia's foreign minister is out there basically saying that all of this talk about Russia, Russia bashing, Russia spying and everything, this is a replay of McCarthyism. We had actually somebody on the phone the other day who said exactly the same thing, that this was a replay of the red baiting, the red scare, McCarthyism. And it really was just a hideous amount of propaganda. There's a wonderful movie out there, Good Night and Good Luck, or Goodbye and Good Luck, and it's basically George Clooney produced it, and it's about Edward R. Murrow and his fight against Senator Joseph McCarthy and his fight against the House Committee on Un-American Activities. And what was going on back then? Let me share you a little bit of history. The United States and the Soviet Union were allies for the purposes of World War II. And that was all well and good. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. That was all well and good that they were allies during the war, but as soon as the war was over, the money junkies in this country needed to recast the Russians as villains and evil because they were very concerned that there might be a socialist revolution inside the United States. In fact, ever since the October Revolution had brought the socialists to power in the Soviet Union, they were perceived as a threat because the American people might look at how life was going in that Soviet Union and decide maybe that was a better system for the American people in the nation. And that could not be allowed to happen. If the private central bankers were going to go on strip mining the wealth of the American people had to be convinced that this was the best of all possible systems and any other alternatives just were completely unacceptable. And I remember when I was in grade school, in our social studies textbook, and I even remember it was Our American Heritage, and I could still see it as clear as day. It had a painting of a riverboat on the cover. And I've often tried to see if I could find another copy of that somewhere in the antique bookstores. Because looking back on it, it was very heavy-handed and blatant propaganda aimed at our young, impressionable minds to convince us to just absolutely reject anything to do with the Soviet Union and Russians and not even listen, not even consider the possibility that anything was working in their country. And they had some very obvious cartoons. And what led to the McCarthy era was Hollywood filmmakers had done yeoman's service making war propaganda films all during World War II. We're better than the Japanese. We're better than the Germans. We won World War II, which is not exactly true. We were one of the group that won World War II. We certainly did not do it on our end. In fact, we showed up rather late after it was obvious that Germany was going to lose eventually anyway. And elements of the U.S. government went out to Hollywood and said, thank you very much for your service to our cause during World War II. Now we need you to demonize the Soviet Union and the communists. Make them evil, make them bad. And a lot of people in Hollywood, which had a little more pride and dignity and integrity back then than they do today, said, wait a minute, they were our allies. They're our friends. And, of course, the plan was to demonize the Soviet Union so that they were not a threat to the existing economic realities of the United States of America. And second, the Pentagon, the Defense Department, did not want all of this huge flow of money that had been pouring into their pockets during World War II to go away. So they needed a new enemy to justify continued elevated military spending. the military-industrial complex. And that was the real origin of the Cold War. Russia's a threat. The communists are trying to subvert our country. The communists are bad. They're doing this and that, in order to keep the money flowing out of your pockets and into the pockets of the military contractors. That was basically it. Now, many people in Hollywood went along with this and started making movies about how bad and evil and nasty the communists were. But there were people of conscience in Hollywood who didn't feel they could bring themselves to so openly betray the Soviet Union after the Soviet Union had helped win World War II and had suffered horrendous losses in the process. So these people were targeted. If they didn't want to go on the attack against the Soviet Union, then obviously they were Soviet puppets, they were Soviet stooges, they were red agents. And that was the beginning of the hysteria. Anybody who was not on board with just immediately being hostile to the Soviet Union was declared a Russian agent. And we're seeing it again today. Lavrov is absolutely right. Remember when the Washington Post was declaring all of our websites, we obviously are arms of Russian propaganda, and then they had to pull that story back because there was no provenance? They really are trying to replay not just the Cold War, but McCarthyism as well. If you're not with us in hating the Russians, then you're obviously with them. And it was a terrible chapter in American history. Everybody looking back on it knows it was morally wrong, it was reprehensible. And yet they're trying to bring it back, trying to sell it, that we need to go back to that kind of better dead than red mindset, even though the Soviet Union is actually gone. But they're still Russians. They refuse to go along with our agenda. They're a threat. And certainly the economic threat is there. And it isn't a threat that the American workers will decide to have a socialist revolution in this country. The new Russian threat is the ruble, which along with the Chinese yuan is displacing the U.S. dollar in global trade and banking. And that's the threat. And that's why they're trying to gin this up. They're replaying the 1950s. The good news is, you, the American people, are not the trusting, naive fools that the Americans of 1950 were. Victorious in war, we're great, we've got no reason to doubt or question anything. And then we started learning during the 60s and 70s that, yeah, some things do need to be questioned, like the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And certainly in the last 23 years that I've been running my website, in the last 10 years I've been doing talk radio, we have all learned many reasons why we shouldn't be taking anything from the government or the corporate media at face value. Because that is how we are being ruled. Lies, fraud, propaganda. But we see it, and that is our advantage. See, propaganda only works if the population being propagandized doesn't know it. When the Russians began to realize they were being lied to, they started using fax machines to share news about how the government was lying, and that's what brought down the Soviet Union. Wasn't Star Wars program, wasn't any of this other stuff. The Soviet people brought down the Soviet Union because nobody wants to live under a government that lies to them. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Blaze in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. How you doing today?
Doing fine.
Great. Hey, earlier in the week when you were talking about, how the mainstream media is being watched and it's less and less being watched, I just wanted to let you know that my son bought me a TV, a Vizio, and there's casting on. So now I take you from my phone and put you on this 50-inch television set. So I mean, you can see it on a 50-inch screen. I didn't know if you knew about casting.
Oh, you're masochist. That's all I can say. You're a masochist.
No, I'm just saying, I'm a huge on casting. I watch a lot of things on casting. Thank you very much for that. But anyways.
So is Cast a channel?
I'm sorry?
Is Cast a channel or some kind of a communication system?
No. Here's how it works. So you got Bambuser, right? Okay.
Yes.
You take Bambuser, and then there's a little casting symbol that goes up on the screen, and then it shoots it to the television set, and then you go on live.
Oh, okay. I imagine my TV set does that too, but I've never gotten around to playing with that stuff here. And
actually, I've done it with YouTube now. I've done it with all. And Mike, I'll tell you, this is actually how your media is going to grow, because you tell people now, say, hey, you got a casting TV, cast me live. We're going to see more. You're in total HD clarity, by the way, on there.
This is not an HD webcam, so I appreciate the thought, but it's not an HD webcam.
Well, you know what I mean. But the HD TV's catching all this.
Okay.
It's catching a lot. And when that guy was in your room the other day tapping his foot on the floor, I don't know who he was. I'm not like looking into.
Oh yeah, that was a friend who was visiting from the mainland.
Cool. Well, I just want to say one thing for you and your wife Claire. I know you've been having throat ailments. Saint Blaise was a Catholic martyr in the 16th century, and he was the patron saint of ailment of the throats.
Yes.
I just want to bless you and your wife Claire that your ailment of your throats cure, and you guys overcome all this ailment. I know you're not big into that, but I bless you in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. You're going to be cured. Okay?
Well, I'll certainly forward that to Claire, because that will be meaningful to her.
She's cured.
We don't even know what she really had. We never heard back from the hospital of any of the tests that they did.
Today, well, I'll tell you, you guys are going through a lot over there more than you think, but according to George Norrie yesterday, you don't want to treat funguses with antibiotics, and you want to treat them with, mother's vinegar and other things, but besides that, I'm not a doctor. I was just trying to give you some ideas here, but Claire's prayers are with me, the St. Blaise, to tell you that, okay?
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I'll pass that on to Claire. I mean, we're using nano silver, which we make ourselves. We've got some thieves vinegar, which is actually, I rather enjoy taking that. And I'm actually doing okay right now, but Claire, it's just taking a long time for her to shake this thing, and it would be a lot better if we had some idea what it is, whether it was one of the many diseases brought to Hawaii from around the Pacific Rim, whether it's histoplasmosis from all the bird nests that are accumulated in her church. And we did ask for specific tests at the hospital, but nobody's ever called us with the results, so we have no idea what we're dealing with.
You know what got rid of mine? When that was going on in Michigan here?
Mm-hmm.
Oil of oregano.
All right.
You know it tastes like crap?
Yes.
But that stuff there, 3 drops under my tongue a day, finally got rid of my throat ailment, and of course my prayers, but that got rid of it.
Okay, well, we'll try that. I mean, Claire is very much into the alternative herbalist medications. We've got an entire cabinet just full of all these different ginkgo biloba and biotin and all the rest of that stuff. And
man. Well,
that's her second religion is herbal natural cures.
And St. Blaise, he's going to cure her tonight. St. Blaise, my friend.
All right, I'm going to hold you to that. According to you,
look that up on the internet. St. Blaise, February 3rd is feast day. He's going to take care of you tonight.
Okay, I appreciate that. Nick, Blaise, we're going to let you go and transfer over to Nick in Southern California. Aloha, Nick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. To piggyback on what the last gentleman was talking about, if you find a chiropractor out there, a lot of them work with it's a product company called Standard Process, and they have a kind of a testing. And the last 2 or 3 times I've gotten sick, I just took what she told me to take, and I was good within a few days. Just a side note for you, but I was actually calling to talk about that article you posted a few days ago from Simon Black from Sovereign Man.
Yes.
And forgive me if you already covered this, but what I found really interesting was where he talked about where America might choose to default first. Did you catch that in that article?
Yeah, I did, and it's the idea of a strategic default has been discussed before. Now, to most Americans who are dealing with their mortgages, the idea of a default is horrific. It's the end of life and so forth. But in point of fact, the United States government has defaulted on its debts previously without the end of the world coming about. Obviously, it creates problems in the years afterwards regarding the ability to get financing. personally, I think we ought to default on all the accounts and then issue our own internal currency that isn't generating interest for a private bank, because that whole scam of private central banking is the root of all the hardship and privation everybody around the world is suffering, and we need to get rid of those.
One of the things that you've mentioned a couple of times recently, you and I have spoken about.
Okay, Nick, I got to put you on hold. We got to take a break for commercials. Do not hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Nick in Southern California. We're talking about the possibility of a strategic default by the U.S. government, and at some point, once you understand that the very nature of private central banking means there is more debt than money to pay the debt, somebody somewhere is going to be forced into a default, at which point the private central bankers simply take the hard assets and put them in their pockets, and all it cost them was ink and paper to do. Nick, are you there?
Well, mahalo for holding me through the commercial, Mike, and one of the things that came to mind, of course, in such a default circumstance, that if the banking went down, and we're having trouble issuing our own currency. I've heard you mention a few times over the past week or two using gold and silver, and you and I had a conversation previously where the question came up as to whether or not there's enough gold and silver to actually use as a currency.
Well, there isn't enough gold to use as a currency in the way that we had in the early years of the United States of America. But if you look at some of the gold currencies that were being floated in other parts of the world, it was actually a card in which was embedded a very tiny piece of gold. It all depends on how you value the gold itself. But cut into small enough pieces, yes, there is enough. Personally, I'd like to find a commodity that is globally accepted, that can grow in supply right alongside the population, which is why I think we ought to have a currency system denominated in kilowatt hours of electricity.
Right, and I'm the caller who you spoke with before about the electro, calling it.
Yes.
And one of the things is I found it really interesting. I've been thinking about that a lot, and I think, of course, the question would come with transmission, recording of it, but it might actually happen organically because people are going solar, and I think that if you have somebody who's thinking ahead, if things went really badly and the power grid, say, were to go down, if you're generating your own power, you could put a meter on it and link up to your neighbors, and that might be the beginning of it all.
Yeah, it could. I mean, in a very real way, we're already monetizing electricity when you pay your electric bill. It's just instead of the electric bill being denominated in something else, the currency is in electricity, and obviously they would have to be stored, but it's a unit of value everybody recognizes. You don't have to have coins or ink and paper. If you were to walk into any country on earth with a 1-gallon can of gas, you would find somebody who would want to trade you something for it. All a medium of exchange is something of universally recognized value that exists in ample enough supply so it can't be hoarded and manipulated the way the Hunt brothers were doing with silver back in the 80s. And so the commodity has to grow in abundance right alongside the population. And obviously, as the population grows, there are more generating stations coming online, more people are going solar. The idea is this is the unit of commodity. And as long as it can be somehow tokenized, and there has to be a way of storage that allows it to be saved for long periods of time. But this could trigger a real boom in terms of the efficiency of solar cells, the efficiency of batteries and other ways of storing your electricity, more efficient means of transmission, because now literally the electricity is the money, and you want to take care of it as carefully as current banks take care of our currency.
And, while I was thinking about how that might look, of course, I was racking my brain. How would you make that efficient? Would there be some kind of localized main power cell that perhaps a bank, quote unquote, would be in charge of? And, these are all really interesting questions to me. And so I can hear your thoughts on that, and thank you for the call, and maybe answer those off the air, or off the phone.
All right, well, thank you very much here. And there are some fine details to be worked on out. But again, the unit of currency, if it's denominated in something, it doesn't have to be tangible. When Nazi Germany kicked out their private central bank imposed on them by the Treaty of Versailles, they issued a unit of currency that was redeemable for 1 hour of human labor. And that was basically the unit of value. And once they were free of having to pay interest on all the public currency to a private central bank, Germany's economy lit up. It was called the German miracle. They even put Hitler on Time magazine's Man of the Year, I think it was in 1937, for this amazing miracle he pulled off. And that's when the rest of the world's private central bankers said, we got to get rid of this guy before the rest of the nations around the world say, this is a better system for us than a private central bank. We'll be right back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the telephones here. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Good afternoon, Tom. Good afternoon, Mike. Tom. Yeah, I want to talk about, you were talking earlier, last hour about Marxism, the commies. What about Venezuela, Michael? I think if Hillary had won, this country would end up being like Venezuela. Thank God Trump did win the presidency, but... Yeah,
it could still wind up as Venezuela because Trump got into office really kind of late. I mean, most of the damage to the U.S. economy has been done. It's just being hidden at this point. But there is another aspect, of course, and that is that Venezuela has been the target of covert U.S. economic warfare going all the way back to the days of Hugo Chavez.
Yes, that's true. And, you know, I believe there's only $10 billion left in their reserve, but...
of which $7.5 billion is already committed to debt payments.
Yeah, but Michael, I want to say this. You know, talking last, about these last week about you were talking last hour about the communists and Marxists. What is this crap that big long-legged Mac Daddy and Bruja, Valerie Jarrett is living in Washington and to try to disrupt Trump? I mean, you got the long-legged Mac Daddy over there literally trying to stir up all this leaks and all this. This is Obama and Valerie Jarrett right there down the street from the White House. Yeah,
exactly, and they're advocating the overthrow of the democratically elected leadership of this country, which is always part of any color revolution. But by doing so, they're in violation of Title 18, the section that says advocating for the overthrow of the U.S. government is punishable by 20 years in prison. Now, we always talk about the collapse of the U.S. government here on this show and how it would be nice to avoid it, but at this point it almost does seem unavoidable. But for Obama and Valerie Jarrett and Eric Holder and Michelle Obama and Hillary Clinton and all the rest of these people to be literally trying to bring down the elected president of the United States of America, they are definitely on the far side of Title 18. And Trump needs to start acting decisively against this, or they're going to succeed in finding some way to get him out. Either they're going to impeach him under completely bogus grounds, they're going to force his resignation, or they may even take a shot at him.
Well, Michael, you're absolutely right. In the Communist News Network, CNN, they're deplorable. They're actually despicable, what they're doing. And one more thing, Michael, before I know you have other callers, but I don't know. I live here in South Florida. We have a judge, a Marxist judge named Hirsch, like you won't give his name. This guy's saying that the illegals have a constitutional right to be released once they're caught. This guy is a total Marxist. This guy should be locked up. This judge. You got these judges that are running rogue all over our Constitution. Donald Trump has the power from the 1952 Act. I just read it, the 52 Act, where he can go with immigration. When you got judges running rogue and saying these sanctuary cities and these illegals have all these rights, what the hell is going on, Michael? It's insane.
Well, what they're trying to do is that they're operating in a climate where they think ordinary Americans don't really know the letter of the law. Most Americans haven't even really read the Constitution, which I would strongly recommend that if you have not done so, that you go ahead and you look at it. And so they feel they can just come on out and say the illegal immigrants have a constitutional right to be released after they cross the border, and they just assume that everybody will believe it because, after all, a judge said it, and a judge would never lie. But it's a complete and total bluff. In point of fact, the judge is wrong. Illegal immigrants have no more right to be released following their arrest than anybody else in this country. That's like saying that people who are busted for burglary and rape have a constitutional right to be released as soon as they're arrested. That's nonsense.
No,
A judge may release them on bail, but very often in the case of violent crimes, bail can be refused. It's not automatic. But we have this group of globalists who are trying to sell this idea that everybody has a natural, inherent, inalienable right to walk across a border into somebody else's country. And that's absolute, complete nonsense. It does not exist in our Constitution. It certainly doesn't exist in Mexico's Constitution. If you sneak across that border into Mexico, you're going to go to prison for anywhere between 2 and 10 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Michael. And, you know, this judge here in South Florida here, this judge is a big-time Democratic fundraiser. This guy, he's a Democrat. I mean, these Democratic judges are absolutely breaking the constitutional laws, and they should be arrested. These guys should be in jail. These judges, Michael.
I'm wondering if this is the same judge that Larry Klayman drew when he was bringing his first RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation, because that was down in Florida, and the judge who got the case is a Clinton appointee, and just threw the case out of court without even looking at the merits. Just said, absolutely not. Just kicked it on out. We do have a corrupt court system.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, Michael, one more thing before I go to the other callers. The sanctuary city, I really want to see what's going to happen with the sanctuary cities with Trump. I want to see if he's got the cojones to go all out and say, hey, you know what, you're not going to get no more federal funds, and you know what, your judges are going to be in contempt of federal law, and you're going to be arrested. I'm wondering if he's going to actually send out federal marshals and arrest some of these judges for what they're doing against the Constitution.
I think that Trump ought to be sending out the marshals to arrest anybody who is assisting the illegal immigrants in any way, and that's including these governors of states who are saying we're going to get them driver's licenses, and you know we're going to, because all of those are Title VIII violations, and Trump has got to act decisively. And I know right now he's busy trying to fend off all these ridiculous attacks from the corporate media and the liberal Democrats and Hillary and Obama and the rest of it, but he's got to break out in front and regain the initiative on this. He's got to stop acting like a businessman trying to find a middle ground compromise, realize that the people he's up against are not interested in compromise, and he's got to start acting like a leader. He's got to act like a president. He's got to act decisively. He's got to regain the initiative, and he's got to start coming down hard on these people who are openly defiant, not only of the President of the United States of America, but the expressed will of the American voters.
Yes, Michael. And, Michael, I think Donald Trump should try to do everything he can to get George Soros arrested, because what Soros is doing is against the world order as far as law. This guy Soros, he's a real clown. He's the one stirring up most of this stuff with the Rothschilds. I don't know what's going to happen. This is going to be amazing what's going to happen over the next 2-3 years.
I mean, really Soros is already guilty of violating the USA Patriot Act. And right. You know, with all of this funding to Black Lives Matter and causing violence, because, you know, any kind of violence or even just the threat of violence to coerce a change in people's political views is basically considered an act of terror under the USA Patriot Act.
That's absolutely right. So we'll see what happens. And like I said, we got all these rogue judges. I would love to see Trump be decisive and quickly and say, hey, listen, you're breaking federal laws, you're going to be arrested. I would love to see that in the media. Those CNN Communist News Network spinmeisters would go nuts. They would actually spin off and, you know, Michael, I think a lot of these Democrats are afraid of they're going to die under a Republican president. That's why they're acting suicidal and that. I mean, these snowflakes are acting nuts. And
I don't know about
carpetbaggers.
I don't know about the rank and file useful idiots on the street level, but the high level liberal Democrats, again, their concern is they have been able to get away with things like drug smuggling, money laundering, murder, and all this stuff for the last 20 years, going on 25. And now all of a sudden they have a president who's not part of their clique. They have a president that didn't grow up, compromised by the Central Intelligence Agency, and they're mortally afraid that they're going to be arrested and tried for their crimes and sent to prison, and that's why they're all uniting against Donald Trump. They want to have somebody in the White House who's going to look the other way and let them go on with the cocaine smuggling and the opium smuggling out of Afghanistan and the assassinations and the various other scams. Okay?
Right on. Michael, one more thing. Roger Clinton, Bill Clinton's brother, was put in jail for 10 years for smuggling cocaine. And also, I saw something really interesting. I didn't know that Bobby Kennedy was such a tight friend with Joe McCarthy when they had the McCarthy hearings. I didn't know Bobby Kennedy and the Kennedy family would act close to McCarthy. McCarthy was pretty to the right, wasn't he, compared to the Kennedys?
Well, again, when the Kennedy brothers were first getting into Congress, they were just trying to be friends with everybody, and I think as McCarthy became more and more objectionable, I think Bobby Kennedy kind of moved away from him. Anyway, listen, we got to let you go here, and before we take our...
John Kennedy would have never been a Democrat now, I can tell you that.
Probably not. Well, even Bernie Sanders is talking about starting a whole new party because he's fed up with the Democrats, and so are most of the Democratic voters. We're going to let you go here, and before we take our next phone call, I've been asked to mention that one of our RBN hosts, Thomas Lacovera, is in jail with no bail, and he was arrested supposedly for being a felon in possession of a weapon after being in the same hotel room with a gun while covering the Malheur occupation in Oregon. So apparently he was in the hotel room talking with some people. It wasn't his gun, but they've thrown him in jail for saying that he was in possession of that weapon. And apparently he's been on a marshal's hold for several months, no bail, and they're just freezing him in limbo. So I've been asked to mention that. We're going to take another phone call here. Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. The coup in the United States of America continues.
They're trying. I don't think they can succeed. For the simple reason that for any kind of a coup...
They better not.
For any kind of a coup to succeed, they have to have the sympathy and support of the general population. And these people don't have it. They have made such a spectacle of acting like spoiled children, they're turning everybody off. And I think this is going to stand as much of a success, a chance of succeeding, as the attempt at a second Iranian coup d'etat in 2009. And that, look how fast that one fell apart. And it had all the same hallmarks here: attacks on the leadership, lies in the corporate media, staged and bought and paid for riots, staged acts of terror. But the Iranian people never got on board with it because they realized what was going on.
The blatant lies of the media, and it's not just in the United States, Mike. It's up here as well. It's just amazing. These left-leaning people are, what would you call it? They're just in an all-out hissy fit over the simple fact that the world is changing and they haven't changed with it.
Yes.
No one wants a one-world government. We've seen what's happened with the European Union. We've seen what's happened with these private central banks, especially coming from Canada. You know, this idea that you can just create this stuff out of thin air and charge people interest into the future, 100 years is just ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. But
we're getting to the point where no one can live long enough to pay their own debts off because they're perpetuated so far into the future.
It's impossible to pay the debt off under private central banking. It's designed that way. It's a trap. It's an enslavement device. And the private central bankers have been getting away with this for 300 years because every government of every nation on earth has a large share of corrupt individuals who will sell out their people's future for a big pile of cash right here and now.
Did in this country.
Yeah, and it didn't start with him. Back with the Canadian Central Bank was supposed to be providing interest-free loans for infrastructure development. And I guess it was back in the 70s, the Canadian government said, well, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to borrow the loans from the private central bank and stick the Canadian people with the interest payments.
There's a video on YouTube called, it's something to do with selling out Canada. Anyways, the guy that put together this video interviewed Paul Martin, who used to be a prime minister here for a short while, but more importantly, he was the finance minister under Jean Chrétien. And he said that a debt-free currency is inflationary. And that's a lie, because just creating loans out of thin air to pay back interest that were created out of thin air is inflationary. There's nothing of value there.
Of course it is. And, when you have a currency tied to a commodity of value, it's not inflationary unless you can come up with more of the commodity. If you have a currency that's tied to silver or gold, you only have as much currency as you have that silver and gold, and it resists inflation. Obviously, with virtual currencies, made-up fairy tale currencies, it is inflationary. And again, that's another way of stealing real wealth from the American people, because you may be getting bigger and fatter paychecks, which put you into higher tax brackets, but you don't really get any gain in the purchasing power. It's an illusion. You get a pay raise, you think you're doing better. You're not, because the purchasing power of that money is constantly being eroded away. If you had a dollar today, right now, is worth about 4 cents of what the dollar was worth at the creation of the Federal Reserve. That's how bad the inflation has been.
Yeah, and you look at the price of gold and other metals that are obviously manipulated. I believe on your website you pointed to the fact that the price of silver has dropped something like 70 or 85 cents U.S. an ounce.
There's obvious manipulation going on.
That's just blatant manipulation. It's not possible.
Anyway, listen, Al, I got to let you go because we've got 2 more callers. We're running out of time for the show here, and I do want to get everybody on the air. Joe in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I got a comment. Trump is getting so much flack. I'd like to see someone organize a demonstration in support of him in the cities and call it STOP. Support Trump, our president.
I like that acronym, but as a matter of fact, there are pro-Trump rallies scheduled in cities all across America for tomorrow, so you may want to get out your search engine, Yandex or DuckDuckGo, and just try and find one near where you are, because apparently they're going to be happening. I'm going to see if there's one happening down here, and I may risk a drive in my 17-year-old Honda to go on down there and take a look at that.
All right. And the question I had that is off topic is, on the Internet, there's a lot of talk, discussion, videos about this approaching Planet X Nibiru. It's supposedly coming in 2017 sometime. Do you have an opinion, or have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard about it, and my opinion is it's a bunch of nonsense. It's the kind of thing the government likes to plant on the Internet and the independent media to try and make us look foolish, so the corporate media can say, oh, those kooks over in the independent media, they think there's a ghost planet coming on in. Just from the area of celestial mechanics, or orbital mechanics, if there was any kind of a planet that was due to be in the area of Earth in 2017, it would already be visible to backyard telescopes, but you can't get anybody to give you a right ascension and declination of where this thing is supposed to be. It's a big fraud. Anyway, Joe, thanks an awful lot. We're going to start with Tom in Utah. I'm going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Yeah, James, I've been looking for some remedy through Trump on the war against the family. I keep, since 2001, I've been drug into cases overturning abuse and neglect and even negligent homicide cases being charged on families for children through the wonderful National Child Welfare Act.
Need to put you on hold. Need to put you on hold. Don't hang up. Be right back to you after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our Kaahumanu Friday program here. We're talking with Tom in Utah. And, Tom, you've only got about a minute and a half to wrap up what you were telling us.
Well, I've been hoping that Trump picks up on the war on the family that has been created by 2 acts. The one, the National Child Welfare Act of 1993, that Hillary drafted as best as I could find out, along with the enhancement of that in the Adoption and Safe Family Act of 1997. Since 91, I've been drawn out of my retirement, which should be life of fun, right? But my life has turned to hell as I've had to overturn cases in family court where the families have been accused of abuse or neglect or even negligent homicide.
Well, now they're starting to arrest homeschooling parents for educational neglect, even if the homeschooling parents are doing everything that the law says they're supposed to do. It's an abusive system. It is an attack on the family, and it's unfortunately driven by money, because anytime Child Protective Services can remove a child from the home, they get more money. And it is something that Trump should look at, but I have a feeling that's going to be a little further into the first term, because he's got a lot of other things that need to be dealt with. Tom, I'm going to let you go here. We're going to take our last phone call of the day. Andy in Texas. Aloha, Andy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Hey, there's 1 or 2 things going on here. either the Democrats are very, very stupid or they're actually playing a very good trump card here, and no pun intended. What they're doing right now is they know the majority, they know the majority of the people voted for Donald Trump. They know that they can ruse something here, and they're either stupid or they're trying to set up that civil war they've been trying to get going with these race wars and all this stuff going on. It's absolutely pathetic what these people are doing. It makes me sick to my stomach, and it makes me laugh at the same time because there's no way these people can get anywhere they're going with this.
Well, here's a big part of what's going on. You've probably heard the phrase post-truth, and what it basically means is a mindset in what you believe and what you can get other people to believe is what's important. Facts and truth don't matter any longer in the post-truth world. It's a very fancy way of saying it's okay to lie and just believe in your lie and you will get what you want. That I don't think is going to work either. But again, these people do not see themselves as evil or villains. They have convinced themselves that they are warriors in a noble cause. That everything that they do that's underhanded serves a higher purpose. If you've been watching that Lee Remini series on the Church of Scientology, it's the exact same thing. All these Scientologists who are committing all these crimes and all this brutality, they do so because in their mind, in the long run, they are helping to save the earth. And that is so close to a lot of what you see in the liberal mindset. That's why I'm calling them the Church of Liberalologists now. Anyway, Andy, we're going to let you go here because we're just about out of time, and it's time for Claire and I to get into the weekend here. I'm going to take her down to the health food stores. Everybody's been sending in all these recommendations for things for Claire to try, so we're going to break open the piggy bank and go on down and get some of these things and try and get Claire mended so she can be back in this chair a week from today. So, have a good weekend. Stay informed. Stay skeptical. Share what you know with everybody that you know. And aloha, America.